Welcome to Drive for Service, a podcast to inspire higher quality of service. David.
Yeah.
Last time you had a tie and a shirt.
Yeah.
And today you turn up with a jumper.
Well, it's the closest thing I could find in my wardrobe to a Stone Island jumper, and I wanted to impress my next guest.
Why? I'm actually scared to know who is our next guest now.
Our next guest is a rock star sommelier, Jason McAuliffe.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, both of you. How are you?
Very good, thanks, yeah.
Just quickly, David, I left the Stone Island at home today and put the active scooter on. This is more of a, an upper class football hooligan chic.
Okay, fair enough, yeah. Jason, tell us about your career story. How did you start out?
Okay, so, God, there's a lot to get in here. So, the career story, I suppose it goes back to school. I hated school. I was no good at school. But the only things that kind of interested me were sport, drama, and English.
Yeah.
After I failed at school, I tried college. I tried to become I went to catering college with aspirations to become a chef because I had this passion for gastronomy from a very early age. So I tried to become a chef. Obviously, college didn't work out because school didn't work out. And this all relates to my ADHD, which we'll probably touch on throughout the podcast, which kind of makes me the person that I am and made me so good and possibly so bad at certain things and certain parts of it. So after 3 months of college, I realised then that education wasn't for me. And I was literally in the pub with my grandmother in Battersea one afternoon, and she said, "You see the guy at the bar?" Yes. He is the banqueting head waiter at the Dorchester Hotel. Have a chat with him. I had a chat with him. He got me an interview for the grill room, which would have been 1983, 84 at the Dorchester. And then that's how it started. I started off as a commie breakfast waiter at the Dorchester Hotel.
Nice. And after that?
Yeah. Exactly. After that, I was kind of fascinated by the sommeliers doing their thing, which was always kind of interesting, but I wasn't really involved in the wine service then. After that, I went to a place that you know very well, Alexander House, which was a super smart country house hotel out in West Sussex, which, as we both know, and you've actually mentioned, was way ahead of its time. Super smart country house hotel, full of artwork, full of antiques. We were dressed in beautiful Cecil G uniforms. The grounds were manicured beautifully. It was a lovely place, and we kind of did a bit of carried on work there, which was still kind of relevant at the time, And that's where I met your brother, and I spent 5 years down there in Sussex, which were great. I had an amazing time down there. It was a really nice part of the world. After that. I went away and did a bit of the other thing I was very good at, and did a bit of travelling and a bit of partying, or a lot of partying actually, in India and Thailand, and so that took up a year or two. After that, I came back to London, was living with my dad, and literally applied for a job at a restaurant on Bellevue Road, which was called Harvey's, which was still owned by Nigel Platts Martin, but was the Harvey's after Marco. So Marco had left, and it was now just a local restaurant. I got a job in there just as a waiter. I worked there for a couple of months, and then they told me that the restaurant was going to be closed down for a refurb, and they were going to open it with a new chef under the name of Shea Bruce, and pretty much the rest is kind of history, really. The restaurant shut for a couple of months over Christmas, reopened as Shea Bruce. And then there I spent 10 amazing years there, or just under 10 years there with Bruce Paul at Shea Bruce when it all kind of happened. After that, I was due to go to America for a big job. That kind of fell through. And when I came back, I wasn't really sure what to do, where to go. I didn't really want to work for anyone else after working with Bruce. I had such a magical time. I knew everything. In the back of my mind, I knew it would all be a bit of a struggle after that. The Dorchester came and were doing a refurb, and they asked if I was available. I was in Spain at the time. I thought, you know what? If I do go back, it's a bit of a romantic story. I can go back to the Dorchester. So I went back to the grill room as the sommelier for the grill and the head of wine for the building. And I spent, I think, 3 or 4 years there in Hotel Babylon, as I now call it. The new Dorchester wasn't the same as the old Dorchester. A lot of things have changed. I came to the end of my tether there. Chris Galvin then offered me a job working for him as restaurant manager at Bistro Deluxe on Baker Street. I spent a year there. That was kind of tough. That was a really tough gig. I realised possibly that restaurant management at that time wasn't for me. And then I took some time out, came to Ireland, and after the world's longest sabbatical, I started back in the industry again, and here I am now at a wonderful property in Wakeford Town called Greenacres. That's the short story. There's a lot more in between.
We haven't got the studio that long.
We maybe will touch on some of it.
Okay, so the importance of service.
Sorry, may I just say something?
Yeah.
I think you didn't touch on when you actually became a sommelier. So when was it? Was it at Chez Bruce?
Well, sommelier is it's a big word, isn't it? And as you know, I've always considered myself a wine yob and not a wine snob. So the real love and passion for wine came from a tiny age. So my parents lived in a flat in Clapham back in the late 60s, early 70s, and they used to make wine from kits. So they would buy fruit concentrates and then with the kits from Boots the chemist, they used to make wine in demijohns and bubble it away in the house. We had a neighbour upstairs who was the original yuppie, Joan Powell. So she would have caftans on, Hessian wallpaper. She had every issue of Decanter from number one. Wow. And they would have dinner parties. And I would be brought out at these dinner parties. And I can always remember her she took my parents under their wing and tried to coach them about, things like garlic, which they wouldn't have used in their food, and wine with dinner and certain things. And I was brought out at sort of chocolate time when they had the after eight mints on the table. And I can always remember being fascinated by the wine glasses. And obviously with my parents making wine, it all started to seep in them from a really early age, But I think with me, it was the love of gastronomy and wine. I kind of love them both. But the wine thing really started happening at Alexander House in the sort of late 80s. And it just kind of developed after then. You also have to remember that I don't have I'm kind of self-taught, really. So yeah, that's kind of part of the journey with the wine, yeah.
Yeah, so you say you're self-taught. I mean, you have a certain style of service that I've always admired. Tell us about the importance of service and your thoughts on restaurant service in general.
And I think you touched on this on your very first podcast, David. I think you can relate a lot of it to football teams and structure. You have to have certain basics. The basic platforms in place for the creativity to flourish. And without the basics being right, it can turn into a real mess. You have to have your right people in their right positions. Mm-hmm. And as you know, if you don't have them in the right positions, it's a bit like a football game. You get pulled out of positions and you get found out. It happens. I see it. It happened in service and it happens like that. So I think the importance of service, it depends on the premises and what style of restaurant. I think for local restaurants, for restaurants like yours and like Chez Bruce, when you have a lot more interaction with the customers, the service becomes more part of the experience. In 2 and 3 star kind of service, they're temples of gastronomy, and these days they're just full of the uber rich. Look, we'll always go to them once or twice a year if we can. I think back in the day, anyone could eat in a 1 or 2 star restaurant. And I think these days, the people that would probably use those sort of restaurants, they're not really interested in our stories and that kind of that kind of community and that kind of people-led service. They're just all about themselves and their own thing. They just want to be seen in the right places, eating that wonderful food. Let's not forget, this is sensational food. But there's different caveats and different styles to a lot of service. But you have to have the foundations right.
So, Jason, I'm really I'm interested. Like you say, you're self-taught. So you never had any mentors or anyone. However, is there anybody that you're inspired to, or that you've been admiring, or is just like the job as a sommelier as a role?
Oh no! So really, I mean, the mentors, the people that really inspired me would be Bruce Paul and Nigel Platts-Martin. Really, not. Bruce got the best out of me on the front of house side of things. Nigel taught me about my palate and tasting wine and the certain sorts of wine that would work in restaurants, you know, and how to buy wine that you could buy at a certain price that would still have elegance and would still have a story to tell. And this is very important, I think. You know, I think anyone can open a bottle of wine and serve a bottle of wine, but telling a story, creating narrative with customers, that's a different skill set altogether. And you know, those narratives that you create with customers, with regular customers, you know, they become regulars. They tell their friends about your business. They become personal friends of yours, and that's how those relationships are built. And built. And Nigel taught me so much about purity and elegance in wines, and finding wines that I could easily tell stories about.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's amazing the fact about telling stories. This is everything which is about wine is just telling stories and build this relationship, as you mentioned, with guests. So
absolutely,
I wanted to ask you, so to build up your knowledge in wine, were you going to tastings, or were you just basically like exchanging opinion and learning from your guests as well?
I just drank a vast amount of it.
That's a good point. I guess is the best way to learn anyway.
Pretty much, you know. I mean, when it started to really blow up for me at Shea Bruce, you know, I was invited to all the tastings. There'd be, as you know, living and working in London, it was, you know, before Brexit. I'm not sure if it still is now, but it was the wine capital of the world. So, you know, my mornings would be spent at tastings, out for lunch somewhere, tasting, back to work, sharing that information with people. It was just tasting 24/7. I was tasting as regular as much as I could, from super high grade. I was very lucky through customers that we met and through the wine trade. I was lucky enough to become friends with Stephen Browett, who I know you know Dave very well, who's the head of Farm Vintners. So I would go to his house, babysit his kids. Right. He'd throw me the keys to his wine cellar. What a mistake that was.
Amazing. But so tell me, like, what do you think? There are the three main characteristics that a sommelier, or skill set that a sommelier should have. Like, just three.
In your opinion? Just
three. So I think, wow, it's kind of difficult because my three would be so different from everyone else's. I think you have to choose wines, and you have to be able to explain the sense of place. That wine is about sense of place. Great wine, no matter how much it costs, has to tell a story about the place it's from. I think you have to be able to communicate that and build those stories, as we've touched on before, with your guests, to create that kind of enlightened service, which then becomes part of the whole restaurant package. The one thing I was kind of really bad at, which I think is very important, which I always struggled with because of my ADHD, was cellar management and things like that. I'm not so good at things like that. Anything that has kind of structure, I kind of struggle with, you know. And I think that was one of the things that I was always not so good at, which I wish I could have been a bit better at, you know. And a palate, you have to understand your palate and the connection with your palate to yourself, you know.
Yeah.
And be able to explain things in a really, I think, an honest and a genuine way. And I think one of the things for myself, and which is kind of why things kind of happened for me, was I was possibly one of the first non-French sommeliers who could actually describe things in a way that not the common man, but in a way that would be more genuine, that people would understand. I think a lot of the people before me, if someone had come into a restaurant and ordered Chablis, they would have been taught to sell them Chablis Premier Cru. Where if someone came into Chez Bruce and ordered Chablis, I would try and ask them to drink something, a Chardonnay from Austria or something from New Zealand, or something that was less expensive than more expensive, to actually engage them that way. Then you're starting to create that enlightened service, which they wouldn't have seen before.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which starts to tell stories, which when they tell their friends, and it all starts to build the narrative of a great local restaurant.
But this is where also I think your sense of being creative comes into play.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, yeah, it is a creative side of it, but it comes through first of all being really interested in people, plus having that connection to the product, which I love. And connecting the two together, and it creates a bit of magic.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. And especially like into places like Medlar or Chez Bruce, for example, where we have this contact with the guest and we build this trusting relationship, then basically it's easier for us to recommend and sell different things because we know what they like and we have this relationship already
Absolutely
established.
right. Absolutely right. And you've got to remember, sometimes that's another skill of the front of house is, you know, we have to create these relationships very, very quickly sometimes. For a new customer, you know, you're going to have to profile them very quickly. Now, back in the day, you could generally judge a book by its cover. Where these days, you don't know. They could be a dot-com billionaire coming in wearing a polo and a pair of trousers and a pair of trainers. Well, back in the day at the Dorchester, you would have known it would have been Lord and Lady, whoever, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But these days, you have to create or try and build that relationship very quickly. Try to understand from a few interactions what they're about, what they're going to like, what possibly they're not going to like, and and those key decisions are really important, you know. And that again for great front of house is a great skill to have. You know, understanding people very quickly, because those relationships. That relationship, for example, they could just be a first-time user of the restaurant that could live in Italy. But if you gave them a great experience, they will pass that on to someone else when they go home to Rome or whatever, who's then going to come back and use your restaurant. Really important.
Yeah, I agree. And you've never been like a competition sommelier, because now they're very like popular in a way. You've never been interested in that.
Clearly, I'd win them all, so I thought I'd give everyone else a bit.
Yeah, I would be fearing you, to be honest, if I was on that side.
I agree. You'd smash it. Yeah.
No, listen, not really my thing. And do you know what? I wish it's possibly held me back in the career, because obviously with the ADHD and stuff, and not being able to read books and get information in. Do you know, I always felt a little bit as an outsider, even amongst my peers, the likes of Garrett and Matt, who I love, and Ronan, who did all the research and could take all the information in, et cetera, et cetera. That was never going to be me. My brain worked slightly differently, so I couldn't really do that. So I had to rely on my other strengths, which were the love of people, you know. And I think because of the ADHD and stuff, the things I were good at were sensory things. So my palate, obviously I'm a big fan of music, hearing things, listening to people. tasting. These were the things that I could that I could build my career on. Where unfortunately, reading a book about certain rivers in certain parts of Hungary, they're just not going to work for me. Do you know I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, but while many people would have, maybe gave up, you kind of accept the situation, and as you said, you went to find your strength and what you could have relied on.
I think it makes Jason unique.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely right. It was. It took me a long time to realise these things. I didn't really get the diagnosis until later on in life when I was in Ireland. I always knew I was a bit different. Everyone knew I was a wee bit different, but no one really knew why or what. And when I actually found out, and had the full-on diagnosis, it made so much sense. It all just made, okay, that's why. Tick, 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 tick. Now I'm more mindful of it. It's still there. There you go. It's plain for all to see. Still, it's still there. It's still a big part of me and of my life. But as you get older, you become more mindful. You get to know yourself a lot more. And the barriers. Sometimes I've crossed a lot of barriers, David. As you know, sometimes I used to get away with it. Sometimes I didn't, but nowadays I'm a lot more mindful. Well, I try to be. I'm a lot more mindful, and I really think the last 10 years or 10 or 15 years are going to be my best years. I really do.
Good.
Jason, tell us about your current job. What are you up to now?
Okay, wow. So Green Acres, yeah. This is a huge property in County Wexford. First and foremost, we're a wine merchant, so we'd be the representatives for the likes of Moex's wines, for the likes of Reyes, and Le Fon, all these things that when I come over to you in your restaurant, I always bring all these lovely bottles. So we're a wine merchant first and foremost. It's a huge property. We have a huge wine shop. We have an enormous art gallery upstairs. We have the thing that makes it really challenging, and I'd like your ideas on this. We have 3 doors into our restaurant, 3 different points of attack. Yeah. You try and build some fucking basics from 3 doors and see where
Is it not 3 Jasons to sort that out?
3 Jasons, sorry.
Points of attack.
That's gone, yeah. So that's a challenge. So we have a delicatessen. We are an all-day coffee shop, so we serve coffee and snacks all day. We serve an informal lunch trade, and then we serve a slightly more formal dinner. So there are a lot of strings to the bows here, which makes it challenging to say the least.
And what you do host a lot of wine dinners and things, do you?
We do. We have wine dinners. We kind of try and do 4 a year with some of our favourite agencies. There are a lot of things going on here. We're a venue for functions. So we do groups of all sorts of sizes. We never turn business away. We kind of do anything and everything, which is a bit of a challenge. But it's a good challenge.
So let's say if we have to transport you back to Sherbrooke or Alexander Place, could you tell me what you had a sommelier team, I guess, behind you?
Yes, they kind of grew over the years. It was one of those things that grew. I kind of started off on my own, and then as the business and the wine side of things got bigger, we kind of built the team at Chez Bruce. But it started off kind of small. Do you know what? That first wine list we had at Chez Bruce, the very first list, Gary was the sommelier at the end of the time where he was in the bar. I think there were just 8 whites and 8 reds by the glass. That's how it started off.
Okay. Wow.
Tiny.
But for example, what were your 3 non-negotiable? If you have to say to a sommelier, something that you must not do is 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's easy. You can't wear a Tottenham or a Millwall shirt, and you can't like country and western music. It's simple.
I think it's probably the easiest one I've heard so far.
Yeah.
And what were you looking for in the wine list when we were building your wine list?
So what? Oh Lord, building the wine list. I always looked for the ugly duckling sort of wines. Back at Chez Bruce, it would have been, finding things like Jurançon for the first time, and those kind of regional French wines that were really unfashionable at the time, but were just starting to happen. Austria hadn't really happened, and it was those kind of quirky wines, that would give experience of a different part of the world and different flavors. That it didn't have to be Sauvignon or Cabernet or whatever. And I was very lucky. It was that was the time when these things were starting to really open up. I suppose I was in the right time in the right place.
And I guess how were the customers? Were they like really open-minded to try something different, as we spoke before?
Yeah, they were. Once, and I think this goes back to those key skills we were talking about. Once people trust you, that and they realise that your story's genuine, then they'll just. Most of the customers at Chez Bruce used to just hand me the wine list and say, "Don't take the piss, Jason, but choose anything you want, really." Yeah. That's because they knew that I'd put my heart and soul into that wine list, and that everything on there. First of all, from what I learned from Nigel, and from Bruce as well, would have been there for the right reasons. We didn't charge over the odd margins on them, and everything that was on that list would have been tasted thoroughly and bought for the right reasons.
And I think you still have a really great wine list, if not one of the best in London. And how do you see the future in wine? And are now people going for classics, or you still trying to push something which is a bit outside the box, if you want to consider that?
Oh no, I just drink sherry all day now, and that's the one thing. Just get everyone to drink sherry. Why drink anything else? Sherry and Madeira, basically.
I remember.
I think.
Well, you were a few people who took sherry when you came to Medlar.
Oh God, yeah, we did. It was do you know what, that Paolo Cortado that was on? When was that last time or the time before?
Last time you took Paolo Cortado Tradizione.
Oh Lord, it was so good, so good. Oh look, do you know what? It's funny here in Ireland. You still can't give people enough white Burgundy, mainly for private clients. But there's a big shortage of white Burgundy, and now it costs so much money, but. It is that good. It's one of those things. I'll always love. I have a thing for Pinot Montrachet, and I think that's going to get harder to buy over the years, because the prices are only going to go one way, and it'll end up being a drink for the elite, which is a shame. But then again, that will give other winemakers in other parts of the world chances for their great varieties or their certain styles of Chardonnay to flourish, So I think as one door shuts, then other doors open, and I think as you get older, and you'll understand this, and as you learn more, you want your wines to be like shaped. You want that. You don't want that anymore, and trying to get customers to understand that just because it doesn't have a huge amount of oak or hasn't got lots of alcohol or lots of flavour, that doesn't mean that it's a low standard wine, and the fact that to get them onto drinking things that they need to think about, have a bit of a conversation with themselves. Well, actually, it hasn't got all this fruit, but actually, I quite enjoy the fact that less is more. I suppose that's really where I'm on with people, especially in Ireland, where they're probably a wee bit behind the UK in what they like and what they don't. They're kind of new to the wine game, and would be used to drinking bigger sort of new world things, when the things that kind of really turn us on are those kind of slightly more elegant, skinny, harder wines to kind of understand. So that's my mission at the moment. My mission is that, not that, I think.
Okay.
Nice.
Anything else, or are we going for the fire questions?
Fire questions, go on then.
Ready for some fire questions?
Oh yeah, this will be interesting.
I wish I had a few more. Maybe David is going to come up with one more too. Jason, I would like you to answer with just one word or either like a short sentence.
That's impossible.
You did it before with the non-negotiables. You can.
Okay.
So, ready? Okay. What's your favorite book?
Lord of the Rings.
What's your desert island wine?
Pulini Montrachet.
Right. Right. Where have you experienced the best service in a restaurant?
Gramercy Tavern.
Oh, New York.
New York.
Who's the person that you admire the most in the industry? Don't say David.
Bruce and Nigel. Bruce and Nigel.
Who is the person that you admire the most outside the industry?
Bob Marley.
Nice.
I thought it was some footballer. Okay.
Oh, Canio, but it could be, yeah.
Right. David, do you have any more?
Will West Ham stay in the Premier League?
No.
That's outside service. I want to ask you something else. What is your lazy dinner look like?
Singapore noodles.
I like that. Good. We got it all.
Nice, Jason. Great to catch up with you. Brilliant.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Drive for Service podcast. Follow us on Instagram @MedlarChelsea and make sure you like and subscribe for future episodes.